Have you ever done everything right, thought it through, followed your feelings, and still ended up somewhere that felt wrong? We're told not to trust the mind because we're not our thoughts. We're told to follow the heart instead. Follow your feelings. Do what feels right, they say. But what if what you're calling your heart is just your nervous system trying to regulate itself? Still on autopilot, just biology running the show. So if you're not meant to be led by your thoughts and you're not meant to be ruled by emotional urgency, then what are we supposed to do? For many of us, the path started the same way. At some point we may realize, well, I'm not my thoughts. And we may start noticing how loud, fear-based, and reactive the mind really is, and how often it pulls us into anxiety, self-judgment, control, and just blowing things out of proportion. And that realization can be liberating and powerful because the mind stops feeling like who we are and starts feeling like what it really is: a tool, a biological mechanism designed to predict, protect, and prevent risk. So naturally, many of us swing into the opposite direction. If I'm not my thoughts, then I'm going to follow my feelings. I will trust my heart. And for a long time, I thought that too. I assumed that feelings were the heart. But something didn't add up, because emotions are biological too. They live in the body, in the nervous system, and they are shaped by hormones, attachment, conditioning, and trauma. And just like thoughts, emotions are reactive and urgent. They rise quickly, and they demand safety, relief, and validation. And that's when I understood something important. Emotional intensity is not the truth, and urgency is not wisdom. Infatuation, craving, fear of loss, the need or desire to secure something or someone right now is not the heart. It's just your nervous system trying to regulate itself. And we may find ourselves at a strange place eventually. If I'm not my thoughts and emotions are not the heart either, then what is the heart? Where do we find it? And what do we do? This became clear when I stopped thinking about it abstractly and just watched it play out in my own life. For a long time, I knew that I was meant to be visible, to speak, and to start this channel, something that I shared in my previous videos. So internally, it looked like this. My thoughts were loud and uncompromising. They said, absolutely not. That's a terrible idea. English is not your first language. What are you even going to be talking about? But you know what? No one cares anyway. That was my mind just trying to do its job to protect me from possible judgment and rejection. And then were my feelings. Fear, real terror. My body just experienced being visible as a real threat. So it was a no too. But underneath both of those, there was something else. A quiet inner knowing nudging. Do it anyways. There was no urgency in that, but still being aware of what was happening internally manifested in this inner conflict that I couldn't resolve for a long time. And what is interesting, that my mind and my emotions were not fighting. They were actually both aligned and resisting what heart was pointing towards. So it wasn't chaos, it was just consensus against change. So I did what many of us do. I went back to what was familiar to stay distracted. I stayed busy, I worked more, I socialized more, just trying to spend all day outside. Just anything really to avoid sitting long enough to hear that knowing that just wouldn't go away no matter what I did. So why would I avoid sitting still? Two reasons. Firstly, it really hurts keep hearing something that you refuse to act on. And secondly, even hypothetically, you think about acting on what your heart tells you to do, you realize in doing so, you would have to let go of a version of a life that felt safe without a guarantee of what would replace it. So living things as they were felt so much safer. Now, when I say the heart, I'm not asking you to adopt a specific belief system. Call it God, the universe, inner knowing, higher self. The language differs, the experience doesn't. What I'm pointing to is a guidance that is quiet, non-urgent, and not emotionally charged. The one that doesn't override your mind or suppress your feelings and emotions. It just waits, sometimes for years, for your mind and feelings to stop resisting. So how does this alignment actually happen? Here's a pattern that I've noticed. When I ignored this inner knowing for a long time, things shifted externally. Work structures changed, opportunities dried up, and people drifted out. And when this type of internal conflict goes unresolved for a really long time, the stress doesn't just stay psychological. It actually finds a way into your body. And the whole experience feels as if the noise is being removed and all of the distractions, all of a sudden and all at the same time, stop working. So I found myself with fewer places to hide, more silence, more space, long walks by myself, journaling again, sitting by the ocean, just thinking and reflecting without any distraction. And something shifted. My mind softened and my thoughts changed the tone. The mind that used to say absolutely not would somehow become more curious and open, and it would start asking practical questions about this time that it had and what to do with it. There has been this nudge about visibility and starting the channel, so my mind turned to my feelings and asked, how do you feel? Are you on board? And they weren't, at least not yet. Instead, they suggested something else that felt safer, finishing the book that mine has been postponing for a really long time. This way suggesting to finish the old loop before opening the new one. And that's how for some time the mind and feelings were aligned again, not towards the heart yet, but no longer resisting each other either. And then the book was almost done and nothing terrible happened. And that mattered because that question about YouTube resurfaced. What if we never tried? And my feelings responded honestly. Well, I would feel deeply disappointed for letting fear decide. And then came the harder question. Well, what if we tried and failed? And my feelings responded, well, that would be unpleasant at first, but not the end of the world, and I'd probably just laugh. But then my feelings asked my mind back, well, what about you? Would you be able to handle it without spiraling and ruminating for months? And my mind realized, yes, it would recover. It always had. And that was a turning point, because the mind and feelings stopped colluding against the heart. They stopped resisting and started speaking honestly, aligning with what heart was pointing to all along. And only then was I able to act. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, picked up the camera that a friend of mine had gifted me a year earlier, and I went into the forest and I recorded my first video and I uploaded it here. You cannot act on your heart when your mind and feelings are colluding against it. And you cannot act when they're fighting each other, when one is somewhat ready and the other one still refuses. Aligned action is possible when they stop resisting and fighting and they begin to talk to each other honestly. And here I mean radical honesty. In Jungian psychology, these dynamics are often described as anima and animus, inner authorities that are pulling in different directions. But labels aside, what really matters is simple. Are they in conflict, in collusion, or in dialogue? If you want to move toward dialogue, awareness is the first shift. In psychology, it's called metacognition, the ability to notice your own thinking. In spiritual language, it's called becoming the observer, that part of you that can notice your thoughts and emotions arise without immediately identifying with them. And without that observer, everything feels like fate, like pressure, like this is just who I really am, and just following the patterns, not being able to escape them. But with that awareness and observer, it becomes negotiable. It does not mean suppressing or controlling your thoughts and emotions. No, it means actively participating in them. And this is what it looks like in practice. First, create space before you try to create alignment by reducing noise to finally be able to hear yourself. Less distractions and less constant noise and input. The next one, separate the voices. Write down what your mind is saying. Then write what your emotions are saying. Let them speak independently without forcing a conclusion, because dialogue is not possible when everything is fused together. Do not make decisions in emotional urgency. Intensity and urgency are not the truth. And if your emotions are reactive, intense, and demanding immediate action, please wait. Especially if you are incredibly sensitive, emotionally attuned, if you're an empath, I know how hard it is, trust me. But regulating your system does not mean suppressing your emotions. No, it means still being able to feel deeply while your thinking brain stays online, without letting the emotional intensity choose for you. Your body can still feel excitement, grief, fear, joy, but you're also capable of weighing consequences, thinking strategically, and choosing deliberately. That capacity can be trained through meditation, breath work, mindful movement, time in nature, just anything that allows to bring your system out of survival mode. Because when your system is regulated, then dialogue is possible. But when it's dysregulated, then just everything feels like an emergency. And finally, ask yourself the long-term question. Not how do I feel right now, but how will I feel if I never try? Not tomorrow, not next week, but years, even decades from now. This question allows to cut through fear without dismissing it. And it's not about choosing mind over emotions. It's about developing enough capacity and awareness to let them both speak without letting either dominate. And once you see that dynamic clearly, something deeper becomes visible. I realized the problem was never the thoughts and it was never the emotions. It was the way we were taught to see them as opposites, as if life itself is something we're supposed to navigate by choosing sides. And we're trained to live in this split so deeply that we rarely question it. But what if the split is not wisdom at all? What if it's just the very thing that keeps us all fragmented? And once I saw that, I could notice that either-or framing everywhere. For a long time, I thought it was just another duality. Mind versus heart, logic versus feeling, as if it's just two sides of the same coin. But I found this framing to be part of the problem, because harm isn't in thinking and it's not in feeling deeply. I think harm begins when we choose to identify with one side and call it who we are, when I am just my thoughts or I am my feelings. But thoughts and emotions or feelings are not enemies or competing truths. They're instruments, just different channels for orienting in this world. And when they are seen as tools, then they can cooperate. But when they are mistaken for identity, that's when they start to fight. And I think that's why many of us feel so torn inside. Not because we're broken or something is not working in us, but because we've been taught to choose just one side instead of seeing the whole. And that's where many of us stumble, because if I'm not my thoughts and I'm not my feelings, then who is deciding? A vacuum appears and it feels extremely uncomfortable. So many of us may rush to fill that space immediately with a teacher, a guru, a system, someone who knows, just something outside ourselves that can tell us how to live our lives. That's when idols are born. The impulse to hand your inner compass to something outside ourselves, because standing in that uncertainty feels unbearable. Hearing the answers are within you does not mean that impulses are the truth. And it doesn't mean that thoughts are the truth. It means developing enough capacity to be able to see without immediately choosing the side. The ability to stay present without grabbing onto certainty. So it's not about knowing better. It's about stopping the habit of outsourcing your inner knowing. So yes, initially it does look like a coin with two sides, either or. But reality isn't a coin. It's more like a diamond with many facets. And each one reveals something real, but none of them is the whole. Science is a lens. Spirituality is a lens. Logic and emotion, lenses. Religion, meaning, mysticism, all lenses as well. People who live more in their mind tend to create the scientific models of reality. And people who live more in feeling often create religious and spiritual systems. Both are sincere, and both can be deep and incredibly useful. But both describe a facet, not the whole diamond. So I think the problem isn't perspective. It's declaring one facet to be the whole diamond or the whole reality. That's when fences go up between disciplines, between beliefs and people. So if it has never been about either or, then what are we all fighting over? So where does it show up in real life? I felt it clearly this Christmas. I was sitting on the floor in my dream apartment, looking at the ocean through the open balcony door, warm breeze on my skin in December, and feeling pure joy, the kind that comes from realizing that a place I once dreamed of as a kid actually exists. And at the same time, I felt grief, missing my family and loved ones I haven't seen in years, feeling totally heartbroken, not being able to hug them or spend another holiday season together. And grief didn't cancel joy, and joy didn't erase grief. They coexisted. And honestly, it just felt so much more aligned to let them both exist at the same time without forcing myself to choose just one. I've seen the same in work and creativity too. I could feel fear about living what was familiar, income, title, certainty, and at the same time feeling so excited about being able to build something more honest and more aligned. And fear didn't mean that I was making the wrong decision, and excitement didn't mean that that was easy. Both were true at the same time. The same applies to love. We're often taught that love means closeness, access, and constant presence. But sometimes someone can love you deeply and still choose distance. Not to punish you, but because staying close as they are now might cause harm, and they realize it. So sometimes distance is the most honest choice. And sometimes you might be on the other side of that equation, recognizing where someone is in their journey and choosing to let them go with grace without turning it into a verdict on your worth, and wishing them healing sincerely with all your heart. This is what holding both sides looks like. And every time you reduce your life to either or, yes, you gain certainty for a moment, but you also lose wholeness without noticing. So maybe the question isn't which side is right. Maybe the question is, why are we so attached to sides at all? Why do we keep building fences instead of bridges between thoughts and emotions, heart and mind, science and spirituality, control and surrender? What if growth is not about choosing the opposites or rejecting one in favor of another, but in developing capacity to hold complexity without collapsing into fear? What if work is in stepping out from identification altogether and being able to see from a little farther back, to see the whole picture by zooming out? Now, I'm not offering a final answer. I'm offering a different way of looking. And if something in you resonated, don't rush to label it. Just notice what changes when you stop asking either or and you start asking, what am I not seeing yet? Because every time you choose a side inside yourself, you create an enemy you have to fight.